event is an initiative of the MIOD in collaboration with the Stock Exchange of Mauritius, and we are pleased to welcome you to discuss on the theme 25% target, building an inclusive board. Just an overview of what you can expect today. So as you can see on the screen, we have an agenda for today. And some housekeeping rules before we start. I would request you to please switch off the sound of your mobile phones during the session. You will also note that we have our photographers and cameramen taking pictures, and I assumed we have requested your permission for that. So thank you very much for your permission. Now, without any delay, I would now like to invite the Chief Executive Officer of the Stock Exchange of Mauritius for an insightful presentation on the theme. Mr. Bigmadu, thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be in this wonderful setting, and I'd like to extend my warm appreciation and thanks to Jyoti for hosting us this morning. And of course, I want to thank also Sheila and her team for putting together today's event. And I, of course, would like to thank all of you present here for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us for a discussion on one of the proposals made in the recent budget concerning the 25% threshold for women representation on boards of listed companies. So the purpose of my short presentation is to give you first an indication of the current state of affairs of women representation on the board of listed companies as we speak. And then I just wanted to highlight those champions of gender diversity within the listed companies, meaning those companies that already meet the 25% threshold. And then we'll also very briefly look at what is the current status of gender diversity in some other jurisdictions. How does Mauritius as a jurisdiction compare with some other jurisdictions that we have surveyed? Of course, our list is not exhaustive. And then I would like to raise the question on why is gender diversity on boards important and what key differences it could potentially make. I stress could potentially make, because I think what we need to avoid is just do some what I call box ticking, which is very common whenever we bring changes, not only across with regard to gender diversity. Any type of change that generally is introduced may be trapped by this trend of just doing some box ticking. And then I will probably introduce a debate about diversity, the importance of diversity from a wider perspective, and we'll look at some of the studies that have been done and which gives a perspective of how diversity adds value to companies that have embraced diversity. So very quickly, so this is what was announced in the budget. To promote gender equality at all levels, listed companies shall have a minimum of 25% of women on their boards. And we know that the Companies Act has been amended through the Finance Miscellaneous Provisions Act 2023 in order to give effect to this requirement. And based on what I know is the date of 1st of January has been earmarked as the date by which listed companies should ensure that they have at least 25%, minimum 25% of women on their boards. So we did a survey on 30th of June 2023. I don't know if you all see, probably I need to step up here so that I don't stand on your way. So we did a survey to understand how many women are represented on companies' board, that is listed companies' board. And based on the survey, of course, we had 61 companies that responded. And the good news is that all those that responded doesn't mean that those that did not respond don't have women on their board. But the good news is that that glass ceiling has already been broken, and all those 61 companies had already have women on their board, and out of these 61, 13 already meet that 25% target. I would just, for example, 8% means 2 companies here have 8% of their board represented by women. 1 company has 9, 10 companies have 10, and here you will see all those that have 25% or more. And if you add up those numbers, it represents, I think, 21% or 13 companies out of 61 that already have more than 25%. So I think companies are getting there, and I guess with this new legislation, there's no doubt that we'll very fast, quickly move to this 25%, and maybe some of them will go even further. So who are those champions of diversity? I've taken the liberty, this is public information. You will see that there are companies that are local companies, but you also have some GBC companies, some international companies that have already gone beyond the 25% threshold. So you have, for example, among the well-known companies local, you have SBM, United Basals, Vivo Energy, Grid, Constance, Hoteles, but you also have Attitude Property, but you do have a few GBC companies like TransSwitch International, Astoria Investments, and so on and so forth. So where are we with regard to other jurisdictions? This is a mistake. In fact, 22% is not of all CEO positions. There is a survey that has been carried out by ILO, and it's 21 to 22% of all boards at the global level are, represented by women. So there's been some progress, but not enough, because it's 1 in 5. Basically, what this means is 1 out of a board of 5, you have only 1 woman, 4 men. And worse, if you look at the level of C-suites or even CEO positions at the global level, only 5% of global CEO positions are held by women. Globally, out of thousands. In fact, it's Deloitte that surveyed 5,000 companies at global level in 2021, and only 5% of CEO positions were held by women. So it's 1 in 20 almost. And we see that progress on this front remains very uneven, and many challenges remain. And it is because of that slow rate or slow pace of change in terms of bringing on board more women that many governments, including Government of Mauritius, have decided to legislate so as to break that glass ceiling and increase the percentage of women either at CEO levels, but essentially at board levels. In fact, I think the first country that really paved the way was Norway, and they went in a big way, with a big bang, coming up with 40% of women to be in boards. And the adoption of this quota, of course, they went even further by coming up with very stringent sanctions if you did not comply with that. So it was a massive change. how do we compare to with other jurisdictions? And we've stated a few jurisdictions like Canada, for example, where there's a quota for the representation of women on boards for state-owned enterprises. Very interesting. And you know, I think in Canada, even at government level, Justin Trudeau, I think, introduced something quite, I think 50% of their parliamentarians and so on are women. France, 30% and 40% by 24 publicly listed companies, plus depending on company sizes. So large companies have to comply with that. Finland, 40. So you see across the board, there's between 30 and 33. In fact, had you asked me this question, let's say 3-4 years ago, personally, I'm against prescribing, you know, what you should do. I was against prescribing that there should be 25% or 30% or whatever, 40% of women. In fact, I've always said that we should encourage women, we should encourage diversity, and it should be a voluntary kind of evolution of society. And I even once in a discussion say that if women are good, probably they should comprise 100%. Or if we can find women that are very good, why not? Why should we say it should be 30%? So that was my view a few years ago, but I've changed that view since, and I believe that maybe because we've seen that it's difficult to break that glass ceiling, unless you come and say we have to achieve. And then slowly this brings changes to the way people think when they see the results, when they see how diversity adds value to the operation side of things, to the profits, to the way the board operates. It's then that this culture change happens. So probably yes, we need to prescribe, we need to come with thresholds, and then hopefully this in itself will create the kind of momentum to bring change. So this brings us to why is gender diversity on boards important and what key differences it makes. I won't be very long on that. There's been a number of studies. Just go on ChatGPT and ask, you know, what are the studies that have been done, and you'll see a whole list, and you can go and read. Many of them have shown that gender diversity, in fact, concretely does add value. For example, this ILO study mentions that when companies establish inclusive business cultures and policies, they are more likely to report, you know, increasing creativity, innovation, openness, and they've even quantified it, 59.1%. Better assessment of consumer interest and demand, 37.9%. But for me, I think the most important contribution of diversity is the enemy of groupthink. You know, it's so easy within a board to have this tendency of groupthink, especially if you have within the board people who are very strong-willed and so on. I think the best example of why groupthink can be a failure, I think the best example in my view, and I will choose that example because this situation has created a lot of havoc, and we even here very far in Mauritius, we've had to pay that price of groupthink. It's the case of Lehman Brothers. I don't know how many of you have studied what has happened to Lehman Brothers. I've been very interested in that because this is part of the financial services sector, and it triggered, you know, a lot of problems, and I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from that example. So very quickly, Lehman Brothers had at the very top its chairman and CEO, a guy called Dick Full, who's a very charismatic, very successful and very inspirational leader who joined Lehman Brothers at the end of the 1960s at a very low level, and then went up the ladder and became before 2008, maybe 15 years before 2008, the CEO and the chairman. And the guy had really transformed the company from a second-tier investment bank to the top tier and one of the most successful investment banks in the US, and was really a driver of change and an innovator and so on. But as the case often happens, when somebody has been very successful, he believes that he's the only one that has all the right ideas, and then he starts, choosing people, and he's respected, so it's very easy for him, because of his past track record, to pick and choose directors that he wants to bring on board. Of course, these directors are very good and qualified people, but very often they become subservient to the guy who's picked them. And this is what then translates into the problem of groupthink, and where you have one or two people guiding the board and driving the board, and then it just happens that, driven by the feeling of making more profits, taking more risk, and making more profits and taking more risk, they brought the company down. And Big Full is one example where, the problem of groupthink can really translate into disaster. So this brings us to the issue of diversity. When we're talking about diversity, when we talk about gender diversity, why do we say it's important? It's because we believe that this will bring a different perspective to the discussions at the board level, different views, different contributions, different value adds, and it's only when these conditions exist that gender diversity will bring value to the company and will make a difference. Because if we come and just implement gender diversity for the sake of satisfying the law, satisfying that threshold, and that's all, in fact, that won't work. On the contrary, it can even backfire. In fact, I personally have met women who are directors, not only in Mauritian companies, but globally at the global level, and they've told me, we are there, but our voices are not heard. It's a man-dominated thing, and although we are there, so this is the point I want to make here today. All these studies that I'm going to show to you demonstrate that, yes, theoretically, potentially, well, not even theoretically, it's based on stats, it's based on observed cases. Women can definitely add value and bring a different perspective to a company and help companies to improve their performances across different kind of criteria. But for this to happen, it is important to go and pick and choose those women that have the experience, that have the expertise, that have the broad knowledge, that are willing to challenge the status quo, that are willing to question a company's orientation, that are willing to bring value, of course, and bring a different perspective to the way things evolve. So this is another study that has been done by Catalyst. It initially did it in 2010, and then it has also updated that, which clearly shows a positive correlation between women, gender diversity, and enhanced financial returns. And here I will hasten to add, for those of you who do statistics, that there's a big difference between correlation and causality. So, of course, correlation means it's been observed that for companies that have more women, for example, in this case, the study by Catalyst shows that companies from the top quartile, that is the top 25% in terms of percentage of women on their boards, perform better than companies from the bottom quartile, the 25% with less women on board, by 16% in terms of return on sales, 26% in terms of return on invested capital, 84% higher return on sales, a higher return on invested capital, and so on and so forth. So these are correlation based on a wide sample of companies, which shows that there is definitely a relationship. And for me, when your sample is large enough and all this is showing the same result, I think we should take it seriously, and we cannot ignore that, okay? And the same thing if you look at this interesting study by McKinsey, which looks at whether there is a correlation between financial performance and diversity in leadership, and they've seen that there is definitely a correlation between increases in earnings before income tax margin and increases in diversity of boards, and they've looked at different regions of the world, so the whole world. They've looked at 366 companies, and then they've looked at how this evolves in the case of UK with 107 companies studied, United States 186, and so on. And they clearly show that there is definitely a predicted increase in EBITDA margin for every 10% increase in diversity. And they've not only looked at gender diversity, they've even looked at ethnic diversity, because when you talk about diversity, it's not only about gender. And they see that very clearly. Boards, for example, globally would add 3.5% increase in EBITDA margin for a 10% increase in diversity, or gender diversity, okay? But if you add to it ethnic diversity, it's even, it adds more. And they've shown that, well, they're looking for those that do statistics, they're looking at the p-value, and you know that the p-value, if it is less than 0.1, it means it's statistically significant, because there is an inverse relationship between p-value and correlation. I'm sure Aisha, who is a specialist in econometrics, would know that very clearly. And so all these this bar chart shows very clearly across the world that there is a positive correlation between having more women or having an ethnically diverse board compared to a non-ethnically diverse board. Okay? Well, I won't get, for time's sake, I won't get into all this. We probably know all about it, So I'm more interested in the way forward here. So how can Mauritian companies move the needle on gender diversity successfully? Okay? I think that what is important is what I mentioned before. We should definitely, well, we would need to go along that route because it's in the law, and I'm very confident that listed companies will go and achieve those targets. But as I mentioned before, what we should avoid is box ticking. I think it is important that there is a change in culture from the very top. I mean, it should be embedded in the company's values that, we champion diversity. So diversity in the large sense of the word, okay? We champion representation of people with different expertise, with different skills, with different experience, with different leadership. I'm not saying that companies are not doing that, I'm sure. I mean, the success of our private sector in Mauritius, clearly demonstrate that, diversity in a different sense of the word has already been embraced. But I think it's also important to see how we take it to the next level. In fact, look at some of the most successful companies in the world. I'm talking about global companies today. I was looking at some of the largest market cap companies at the global level. You take a company like Alphabet, Google. It is driven today at CEO level by an Indian, Sundar Pichai. Okay, you take NVIDIA, the champion in artificial intelligence, a company that today is worth $1 trillion. Has gone up big time. It's a US-based company, but led by a Taiwanese, CEO called Zhang. So The world is changing. I mean, what we are looking for is talent. We are looking for people that can make a difference, people that can bring value and transform not only the board but also the the management of companies. I think inclusion matters. So the traditional boardroom culture is very hierarchical with a tendency to show difference based on tenure and committee leadership. In fact, a survey of 700 directors conducted by PwC in 2019 revealed that 43% of respondents felt it was difficult to express dissent in their boardroom. For new directors representing different backgrounds, it can be even more challenging, okay? So the point here is, if the goal is to encourage different perspectives to make better decisions as a group, experienced directors must take it upon themselves to welcome new voices and dissenting opinions. I think this is what is going to create and challenge the status quo and help to create value. I would also like to add that I personally believe that this 25% quota, which currently targets listed companies, even when we looked at the survey, we see that in most countries of the world, thresholds have been set against listed companies. Why? Because listed companies are public companies and they are supposed to take the lead in terms of transformational changes. So, but I also believe that probably we should, discuss about this shift in mindsets, and even unlisted companies should embrace diversity. Government-controlled companies, public interest entities. So this is what is going to bring job. Of course, there's always a place where to start. It's good that we've started with listed companies, but it's important to extend that to so diversity beyond so just to finish, diversity beyond gender diversity. Think now that we've been we've set the scene for more diversity. I think it's the time to enhance this discussion and look about diversity as a whole and see what is it that can bring more dividends. And I mentioned this study by McKinsey, which asked the question, what's the likelihood that companies in the top quartile for diversity financially outperform those in the bottom quartile? And the results are very clear. And this is something else that shows that both ethnic and gender diversity will make a difference to the future of the company. So just to sum up, I think. So we live in a deeply connected and global world, and therefore it should come as no surprise that more diverse companies and institutions are achieving better performance. This is a fact, and this is where it's just like investors today are more and more putting their money into companies that are championing the case of diversity, that are also championing the case of sustainability, because these are very important matters for investors. So yes, we should start looking at diversity over and above gender diversity. What about diversity in age, diversity experience, ethnic diversity? And given that the higher returns that diversity expected to bring, it is better to invest now, since winners will pull further ahead and laggards will feel that they are behind. So I think it's a good conversation that has started, and I think the scene is set, and I'm very confident that our listed companies will embrace change. They've already, as I mentioned, been embracing change over the last decade or even more, and I think they will extend that process, and I'm pretty sure that this will create value for the main shareholders, for the shareholders, the minority shareholders, but also for the general ecosystem at large, and why not for the country at large. So thank you for your attention, and thanks to MIOD for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benimadu, for this very insightful presentation. Without any delay, I would now like to invite the CEO of the MIOD, Mr. Sheila Jodha, to present to us. If you could please join me, Sheila. Thank you.
Thank you, Nafisa. You would change the slide, please. Right. I would first of all thank Maurice Group, who is one of our patrons, for hosting us, and Sam for partnering with us. I would like to share with you my very first days as a board director. Especially, I had the opportunity to be the very first lady in a board. So when you sit on that table, you look at the left, you look at the right, it seems weird. But the good news is that I have been very much supported by my colleagues as board directors. And the feedback that I got was that I ask pertinent questions. Well, and another feedback and conclusion that came from that is that diversity brings, the conversation in the boardroom, it gives this a different dimension. It brings it to a different level. It gives a different perspective. So just wanted to share that feedback, and with that, we start with what I'm going to showcase today. Well, Sunil from SAM has already indicated, the stats, what we have in terms of the number of listed companies, right, the survey done, and what we've seen from that survey, the one that was conducted, 13 listed companies out of 61 has met the 25% target, right? So which means out of the survey, there is 48 companies who have not met the 25% target. And when you convert it into percentage, it's about 78%. So it's huge in terms of findings, when we align it with that 25% target to be met. So clearly there is something that needs to be done. If we want to reach to that level, which Sunil just mentioned, align with international practices and be seen, as a jurisdiction which follows good corporate governance practices. And talking to the next slide, diversity has been something on our agenda for quite some time. It has been in the code, and the code clearly mentions that it should be there, right? The diversity is something that we should incorporate. And the types of diversity, I'm not going to go into detail with that. Sunil mentioned about it. We don't have only gender diversity. And we have age, we have ethnicity. There are many other elements of diversity which we need to consider. And this is what makes it an inclusive board. And this is what MIOD is advocating for, an inclusive board. So moving on to the next slide, I just wanted to share again, it's not just it stems from our code. It comes from the OECD principles. And where it fits in, there are different chapters. It fits in under the responsibilities of the board. And moving on to the next slide, again, there has been a number of areas that have been reviewed. There are 10 priority areas recently that are being considered. And one of them is, as you would see on the slide, it's it's on the last item, it's diversity on boards and senior management. So it's not something new here, the code, it's something that stems from international practices that we, as a jurisdiction, we are trying to reinforce that. Moving on to the next slide. So why? Why advocating for diversity and inclusion, and why gender diversity? Why is that important? It's because we want to prepare the leaders of tomorrow. Simple. And we want to advocate for an inclusive board. So that's why you would see as well, since we've started, and I think there are other maybe corporates advocating for that, we've seen a slight progress in the Global Gender Gap Report 2023, where we used to be, Mauritius as a jurisdiction, we used to be ranked 110th in 2020, I think 2021, 2022 progressed a bit, 105th, and now we are 98th. So clearly we've made some progress on the international front. And needless to say, the Conferry survey that was done in collaboration with the MIOD, the figures are self-explicit. 13% of boards with female representation, that's the percentage, which is very low as compared to the average, which should be normally around 30 to 40%. And board representation, chairperson, board with female chairperson, you've got only 6%. So clearly we need to do something. And moving on to the next slide, the visa, please. Moving on to the next slide. That's why at the MIOD we believe in that noble cause. And we've revamped the Women Directors Forum, which is one of the advocacy forums that we have. And in fact, why? What is the purpose of that WDF? It's a platform that catalyzes fundamental shifts to boost women representation at C-suite and board directorship level. And currently we've got 24 members emanating from, our founders and patrons. Currently we've got 13 founders and 34 patrons. So these members are representatives of the founders and patrons coming from different sectors: agriculture, property, banking, construction, education, energy and mining, multi-sector, public relations, ICT, as you can see on the slide. And one of the milestones that we've achieved is that we've created a path boardroom roadmap. And that path to boardroom consists of the different steps that you see. Step 1 is about having a Women Leadership Academy. It's not a typical training that we offer. It's just that women, sometimes they feel undermined, they feel not confident, they are not enough self-assertive. So that Women Leadership Academy was geared to tackle these challenges that women face. And step 2, of course, it's the coaching, and then we have the mentoring process. And step 4, once they've given the support that they need, then they are enrolled on our directors register. And of course, if they want to pursue the experience, as board director, they can be enrolled on our development program. And what has been the achievements? With the Women Leadership Academy, currently, we've been able to train 162 women. 14 of them are female entrepreneurs. We've got 15 female STEM, and 45 out of the 162, they have already board experience. Moving on to the next slide. And then some of these women, they've decided, okay, I need some coaching and mentoring to uplift myself. So women who completed coaching and mentoring, we've got 26 for the time being. This is an ongoing process. That coaching and mentoring program, we've got 20 coaches and mentors who are here to support this initiative because they believe in that cause. And Director Development Program, that's one of the development programs that we have. It's a collaboration with the Open University. What's the end game in that? There are different levels. It gives you a chartered director status. And of course, it's about education, it's about knowledge on, what are the responsibilities of being directors, but there are different modules in that. I won't go into the detail today on that, but just to inform you that we've got 4 cohorts already launched. Number of participants, 102, but since it is a long process, 2 has been able to achieve the chartered director status. You know what's amazing in all this? It's the feedback that you receive when they finish that. It has been a journey, but that experience really demonstrates the level of satisfaction that they've got from these initiatives. Moving on to the next program that we have, again, which is another director development program. It's the Applied Directorship Program, which we conduct in collaboration with CERDAR Group. And this one is it's not a typical development program. It's like 3 months theory, and the rest, it simulates you into a board in connection with other South African, mostly South African and African peers as well. And you're required to be there to act as a director. So they train you and they coach you. It's an 11-month program. So we've been launching 3 cohorts so far. Number of participants, 25, because 3 cohorts and 25 Mauritian participants. And those who completed, we just completed the first cohort with 8 Mauritians qualifying for the Applied Development Directorship Program. Another area that MIOD would be there to accompany, to bridge the gap, is the board recruitment services. And the question that I hear most of the time, where are those ladies with experience? Sunil just mentioned, we need to advocate and put forward those ladies who have that knowledge, who have the experience. Yes, we do have. So in our board recruitment, we want MIOD to be the go-to place for the recruitment services. And recently we've been collaborating with another service provider so that if we need a director from Africa, for instance, to serve on the board of Mauritius, can be done, or it could be vice versa as well. We just need to be in touch with MIOD. And what it has been in terms of the process, it's, of course, it's a guided journey. It's a process. We need to understand the scope, what is the need of the board in terms of the profile that you want for director, the search, then we conduct a search, and then we shortlist, we interview, we select, and then there is an induction, a small induction with the aspired director. So that's the whole process that we do. But let's come to the stats. What about the figures? We've got all the system that has been put in place to prepare the leaders of tomorrow. But what do we have? Currently, MIOD has got 1,607 members. We've got 65% male representatives and 35% female representatives. And of course, we've got a directors register. And that directors register would consist of directors with the relevant experience, right? Be it competencies, and sometimes they've got the competencies, but they're aspiring to serve in a board as well. So we've got 440 male representatives who've got board experience, the rest 235 no board experience. But if we look at the female representatives, the figures are comparatively lower. So we've got 128 ladies who've got board experience and 163 no board experience. But these ladies, they are competent, they are senior management level, but they just need to be accompanied to be able to have that experience that is required. And when we look at the directors register in terms of their experience by sector, we've got a diverse range of services. You would see different sector, financial services, business and professional, others, you've got banking, multi-sector, I can go on and on, right? So this is the basis that what we have. Of course, this can be improved and we need to improve it, but at least it's a good starting point that we have. And moving on to my last slide, in terms of available board competencies, this is a summary of what we have. We've got 440 directors registered, male representatives, with board experience 440, female 128, 45 from the Women Leadership Academy, which means 173 there, ladies with board experience and technical competencies. But MIOD will continue to work and accompany those who lack, some of the experience, because we've got figures there. We've got 173 which have got technical competencies but no board experience, and we've got 117 who completed WLA but who are following the path to boardroom journey. So we've already started the work. It's a journey. We've got our goal, and the goal is to be able to serve the business community and to be able to accompany those enterprises achieving that 25% goal. So we will continue and pursue that objective, and we are excited about what we do right now, and we'll continue to have other initiatives that would create a visible change to society. I think that's about it on my side. I hope I've been able to enlighten you on this inclusivity on board that we are advocating on, and handing over to you, Nafisa.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we now have the pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for this event today, Mr. Jeremy Stockdale. So Jeremy, I'll give you a brief introduction before handing over to him. He's the founder of MIOD, which he established in 2019 to create a more data-driven and human-led approach to leadership development. He draws on 2 decades in the banking sector, leading large teams across the UK and Africa. His passion for leadership, extensive experience and business acumen help organizations and individuals to lead their people with purpose, humanity, and a thirst for continuous learning and development. Jeremy holds an MBA with distinction from Warwick Business School and is an associate of the London Institute of Banking and Finance. He has also coached, mentored, and consulted with multiple clients who have benefited from his wide-ranging leadership experience and open, honest, and engaging personal style. It is my pleasure to have you with us, Jeremy. Without any delay, over to you now.
Well, thank you very much, Nafisa, for that extremely generous introduction. You may have been able to tell I wrote that myself. Thank you very much. It was a real pleasure and really insightful to hear your comments, Sunil, and also your Sheila. I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say later on, Jyoti. And thank you to Monchwazi for hosting us in this spectacular venue. It's a real privilege for me to be able to speak about a topic that is so dear to my heart and on an island that I consider to be my spiritual home. And what I want to talk to you about, I want you to think beyond just the... Am I pressing the right button? Thank you. I might come a bit closer. We all know what the finance bill says, and we know what the expectations are. And I want to echo some of the comments that Sunil and Sheila have made so far. I want to encourage this audience, this group of sort of powerful, influential people to think well beyond the finance bill and think about how you can unleash the true benefits of gender equity and inclusion for everyone. I'm going to start with an unusual question. Have you ever seen a bird fly with one wing? Anyone here? No, me neither. So there's one. That's a puffin that somehow, with just the one wing, has managed to not only get off the ground, but apparently has caught some fish. It's quite an impressive feat. And I saw a lovely analogy that came from Mary McAleese, who was the former Prime Minister of Ireland. And she said that that's kind of how the world works, that we rely overly on just one wing, the masculine wing. And that means we kind of flap about and do the best we can. But just imagine what it would mean if we could actually use both wings and use the feminine wing as well, how we could soar and how much better balance we could have in government, in workplaces and society as a whole. So that for me is just a powerful analogy about the opportunity we have from gender equity. So I'm going to talk about 3 things. I'm going to talk about why, how and what. So why do we need gender equity? How do we create it? And then what can all of you do to go away and help us make progress rapidly? It'll take a long time, but you can start to make progress quite quickly by just following a few simple ideas. So we'll start with why, as I always like to, as Simon Sinek taught me to. And I'm just going to share 3 things. There's 3 reasons why I think this is important. The first one is, it's been touched on already, the economics of this are so compelling. Secondly, the fact is that our future depends on it. The planet's future depends on us creating greater equity. And then finally, everyone benefits from this. This is not a case of just, men handing to women, women doing well. We all benefit from gender equity, but fundamentally it's the right thing to do. Morally, it's the right thing to do. So I won't spend too long on the business case, because you've heard a lot of the statistics already, but one that always fascinates me is that whether you work in hospitality or textiles or retail or finance, whatever industry you're in, the vast majority of purchasing decisions to buy your products and services are made by women. It's over 70%. And that figure is expected to rise to 80% by 2028. So if you haven't got decision makers in your businesses representing the 51% of people that make 80%, 4/5 of the purchases that happen in your company, you're missing a huge opportunity to cater to your customers' needs. So, we'll just skip on a little bit. There we go. Sunil's already mentioned the fact that companies generate better returns on equity, better profitability, so I won't go through that. That's proven just by having female representation. And And McKinsey estimated that if we were to achieve gender equality by 2025, it could add $28 trillion to global growth. That's the equivalent of the US and the Chinese economy combined. So it's quite a compelling prize. So that's the business case. Slightly more controversially, but more worrying for me, is just the impact on the planet if we don't take some action. And there's a global trend that's taking place, sort of mega trend across the world, particularly in developed countries where populations are declining. And there's a number of reasons for that, but one of the fundamental ones is women are expected to make a choice. You have to make a choice between your career or your family. And this wasn't a problem in the first half of the 20th century, but in the second half, women's empowerment unleashed huge potential. Women started going to work and having careers, and that drove a lot of the economic developments of the second half of the 20th century. So the US became a global powerhouse because of women going out to work. But the trouble is, in those 50 or 60 years, we haven't made much progress in making it easier for women. You probably saw Jacinta Ardern recently stood down and said, I've got nothing left in the tank. I can't go on any longer. And some of the headlines said, can women really have it all? And I found that really insulting. Why can't they? Why is it just because the chromosomes that we're born in, that men can just have a career, have children, have a family, but women have to make a distinct choice? And the problem we're having is they are making that choice. So women now are thinking, well, actually, I want to really build my career before I have children. And maybe I'll have children in my 30s, maybe even my late 30s, early 40s. Maybe I'll have one. Maybe I'll have none. And I don't blame them. I mean, why not? You're independent, you can make your own choices. The problem is that's making populations around the world are declining. And it's really been noticed in places like China. So China has 1.4 billion people. Until recently, it was the most heavily populated country in the world. I think India has just overtaken it. And in 2022, their population shrank by 800,000. So it's a drop in the ocean compared to 1.4 billion. But what's fascinating is that based on their current trajectory, and don't forget, until 10 years ago, they had a one-child policy, so there's quite a history here. By 2100, population of China will fall to just over 700 million. So in less than 80 years, their population will halve, based on the way they're going at the moment. I probably don't need to tell people just how economically and societally catastrophic that will be for a country of China's size. And this is happening in the Western world as well, in other parts, the developed world rather than the Western world. We don't take this seriously, the planet's future could be in real trouble. And then the final thing is, this is just good for all of us. It's not a case of, say, men giving to women and women benefiting. Gender equity benefits us all. It enables men to have, full and rich lives that aren't based on these gender stereotypes. So we have to be strong and we have to be confident and never show our feelings or our vulnerability. It's nonsense. And I love this quote from Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is a US senator that's always fought for social justice. And he says, when men and women stand together for justice, we all win. And that's really the message here. We all win. So, I'm just going to quickly share my why. I won't take too long. There's personal reasons. I have a son and a daughter. My daughter's 20 and my son is 16. And I want them to have the same access to opportunities as each other. I don't want Toby, who's 16, to feel restricted. He can't do certain things because he's a boy. Or for Phoebe, because she's a young woman, to not have access to things that she might want to do in her career. For me, that's just about being fair. And a core value of mine, and this is where it comes into more of the moral imperative, is there's a right and there's a wrong. I fundamentally believe in fairness. That's why I talk about equity. I believe that this is the right thing to do. And I want to encourage others to do the same. But even beyond the moral imperative, what I learned in my career is that it benefits me professionally. It benefits everyone professionally. Building on some of the comments that Sunil and Sheila made, we all have access to two sets of energies. We have masculine energies, we have feminine energies. The masculine energies you'll probably recognise as things that are really valuable in corporate environments, being strong and assertive and confident and goal-driven and focused and disciplined and having real clarity And all of those things are really important. You absolutely need those. But what about the feminine energies? So being compassionate, nurturing. I was having a conversation with Avinash on the way up this morning, and he was saying how...
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jeremy, for this very interesting session. Before ending, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite the Group Chief Executive Officer of Montchoisi Limited to share a few words with us on her journey as a woman leader.
Thank you. Thank you, Nafiza, and thank you, Sheila, for choosing Montchoisi Legal for your event, and Sunil. Welcome to Montchoisi Legal. I understood that this is the first time you've been here, and we definitely need to rectify that. Bienvenue à tout le monde at Montchoisi Legal, and hope you keep on coming. You know, I mean, this is such an out-of-box sort of venue for an event, and look how wonderful it is. And officially, it's maintained Mauritius, Jeremy, and this is maintained the north of Mauritius. My chairman is here, so I have to acknowledge him. Where do we start? I've got 10 minutes. Let me first of all say, you know, I know a little bit about corporate governance. I've spent nearly 30 years of my life in the boardroom, sometimes as CEO, sometimes as director, executive, non-executive, sometimes as chairman, and sometimes as company secretary. And that journey has been in Mauritius, in private companies, listed companies, in the UK, in banks, and in Brussels. It's not been, you know, I've seen it, let's say, from all angles. And Sunil was talking about Lehman Brothers. I know some of it because I was in Merrill Lynch at that time, and I remember we went home on a Friday not knowing if we were coming back on a Monday, and luckily Lehman went down and Merrill's was saved. And this is the story of, you know, corporate governance and risk taking and having women on boards. What part of my journey shall I talk about? I was thinking about it this morning, you know, what is it that I will be able to tell in 10 minutes? Let me tell you about Montchoisi, my journey in the last 7 years. So back in 2015, I think, there was this post-financial crisis in UK, there was this thing about gender diversity. And so I sent my CV around, and one lovely lady, big champion of gender diversity, called me and said, you know, you've got a golden CV, but you need to have one directorship on your board, otherwise it's so difficult because they're always looking, oh, she has no experience, she doesn't have UK experience. So she gave me an advice. She said, why don't you get a directorship from Mauritius or in Africa? And, you know, that would ease the path. And I knew someone from my past life in Mauritius, so I contacted him. You know, what is the non-exec directorship market like in Mauritius at the moment? And he said, you know, I've got a job for you. And I said, well, but I'm not looking for a job. I have no intention of coming back to Mauritius. And he kept on talking to me, and I said, but then he told me about Montchoisi. And I said, are you serious? And I remember it took me time to digest, and I again spoke to him. They were chasing me, and I said, but are you serious? Have you seen, you know, I'm a woman, and I'm a woman of color. And you're probably wasting my time. And he said, no, les mentalités ont changé, you know, please send us your CV. They were really convinced about this. And here I was for a few months talking to my chairman that I had never met, and to a few directors by Skype. And they had the audacity to recruit someone who is standing here today, who is not from their family, and this is a traditional, conservative, small family company. They had the audacity to recruit someone who was not from the family, not from the community, who knew hardly anything on real estate and never done real estate in my life, and who didn't play golf on top. Who still doesn't play golf. And so, you know, we spoke for a few months, and I finally decided to come. My husband really wanted to come back, and we said, okay, let's give it a go. Arrived in April 2016, and the whole place was, you know, upside down. They were breaking ground. The golf and the IRS project had just started ground, so we had to, this massive machinery of delivering a 11 or 12 billion rupees project, which took us like, you know, 3 good years to finish and hand over. And then we started the smart city projects. And we got our permit, I think in 2019, and hardly a year later, COVID came. And, you know, in real estate, lockdown happens, and we are selling mostly to foreigners. And we are in lockdown, our golf course is closed. There's fear, there's panic, there's anxiety, there's, you know, we're doing cash flows every day, best case, worst case. All those scenarios are playing out. And we had to change course. You know, no one realized the magnitude of the storm that we were facing, and every day was like looking deeper and deeper and deeper. And so we changed course, and we started unrolling our new projects right in the heart of COVID. In June 2020, we launched our first project, and a second one in October of the same year. And this year, we're handing over those projects. We handed two projects, a residential and C-Care, the private clinic, which started operation a month ago. And we are handing 3 more projects this year, before the end of this year, to tell you the magnitude of what we are doing here. And we are starting 5 new projects, so from concept to development. So here is a very conservative family, and there are 11 directors on the board, all family members. We are a private company. We are not listed, but we are a PIE, so we have to meet all the requirements of the corporate governance code. But just imagine the audacity of this conservative family. They appoint not only a CEO who is not from the traditional route, they also give me free hand to recruit who I want and who I need. And in my team today, all my execs, we've never had any interference from the board or the family to recruit someone. We only go for the best candidates. And I think that's the best recipe for success, is go for the best talent, as Sunil said earlier. And the success is around you. Montchoisy has become, in less than 7 years, the fastest growing leading developer on the island. And we have not missed one dividend target to our shareholders, not even during COVID. Even in 2020, we paid dividends to our shareholders. Most companies couldn't pay dividend in 2020. So just to tell you that we are Montchoisy Group, and not just me, we are a living example of how diversity and inclusion really is the recipe for success. Everything that we are looking around you is the fundamental basis of it is based on, you know, go for the best talent and you know, focus on the results and the performance. I won't be very long, but maybe just 2 or 3 things that I would like to add before I finish. One is, I think Sunil, you mentioned groupthink. That is one of the biggest dangers of ticking box sort of exercise that we have to have 25%. So let's get, someone from our social network, or someone who plays golf with us, or someone who is in Rotary with us, or, one of those clubs. I think that's the biggest danger of just trying to tick the box and make sure that we are meeting the requirements and not really go and get the best talent in terms of the board directors. Second is building the pipeline. We can't just go out and try and recruit directors. We have to, nurture them from and promote women and people of diverse origin all through the leadership. So they are growing, and then automatically there is a huge pipeline of people from diverse background, and women included, who are there out later on for non-executive directorship role. Voilà un petit peu. For those who have not visited, I'm going to be cheeky, and for those who have never been here and who would like a tour of the estate, please, speak to us. Ravish is here with a golf cart. He will take you around. I know that when you drive around here, you don't get any indication of what is inside. And there's really an amazing world inside the estate. So please, if you would like a tour of the estate, Ravish will be very happy to take you around. Thank you very much.